So, I need to be honest here. After finishing the Zhongli guide, I got super bored with Genshin. I struggled to even find the motivation to do dailies at points. Because of this, I decided I wanted, nay, needed a change of pace. A change that would deliberately put me on the back foot. Something that would truly make the game a challenge again. That didn't happen at all. But what I did find out is that a unit many people consider to be the worst 5-star in the game actually isn't all too bad. Yeah, I built Qiqi, and I experimented around, and what I found out, well, I guess that's what you're all here to find out. So, the question. How good is DPS Qiqi? What does her kit practically bring to the table? And most of all, does she actually suck? Good day to you all, you based bluefins. I am the freshly rested and recovered immersive fish, and today, using theory crafting, mathematics, and way too much investment, I'm going to answer all of this and more on this episode, a return to form of Fish's Guide to Genshin. Alrighty, let's kick this off by addressing the elephant fish in the room. Qiqi is a lot better than people give her credit for, and that is mainly due to the role she is commonly seen being used in. Could she benefit from some improvements? Yes. Is she complete garbage? Definitely not. Being 100% honest, Qiqi is a bad, pure healer, because the only thing she does in that configuration is heal. You switch to her, you press E, you maybe do a couple of attacks to heal the team, and you switch off, ulting every now and then. This is your typical Maiden's Beloved 4-piece attack build that is just purely trying to heal as good as possible. This conception is the core reason behind why people see Qiqi as such a bad unit. Based on my own testing and the findings from the Qiqi main subreddit and Discord, a community that I've essentially been stalking for about 2 months now, Qiqi should not be built as a pure support. In fact, her best roles are as a physical sub-DPS or a burst DPS in a similar vein to, say, Mona or Zhongli. And while on the surface, these options seem weird to even recommend, when looking at her kit, it does start to make sense. In each role, she still is healing, but her kit isn't restricted. And speaking of her kit, let's look over that. Let's kick this off with normal attacks, as it is definitely her biggest point of contention. Not only are they how Qiqi evenly spreads heals across the team, but they are usually pretty weak. Even looking at her best combo, charged attack spam, you're only looking at a motion value per second of 145.1% at level 6. It isn't exactly anything to write home about. That said, a couple of things do raise them up quite a bit. Firstly, it's physical damage, meaning anything relating to improving physical scales better than the elemental damage types. This basically means that set bonuses and goblet main stats both give more physical damage than their elemental counterparts. And secondly, while she isn't amazing at it, she is the cryo component of a superconduct reaction, shredding 40% physical res. All around, no, Qiqi's normals aren't the worst. Physical Qiqi is very viable purely due to the nature of physical damage characters, and due to her healing interaction, she can fill in where needed, dealing decent enough damage while also healing a team. Onto her skill, it's more or less just there to heal. I wish I could think of more uses for it, but it's just kind of on the damage front. An initial meltable hit of 134.4 cryo damage at level 6, followed by periodic 50.4% cryo damage instances is okay, but the key to this ability really does come from its heal. This is, after all, a purely support-oriented ability. That said, I have at least found one decent plus to it. It's pretty fantastic at enabling the 4-piece Pale Flame set if you're using Qiqi as a physical sub-DPS. That said, unless you are, pushing for a sub-DPS, Pale is still ill-advised for a carry option due to that 15-second downtime period. Finally, we have the strongest part of her kit. Qiqi's ult is without a doubt the most overlooked element of her entirely. It's got fantastic multipliers, and it makes her healing even better. In fact, while it isn't overly recognized for specific quick swap teams, by reverse melting Qiqi's ult, she can actually hit some pretty insane numbers. Not much to say regarding her kit other than that. Her Ascension passives both pertain to healing, so it isn't something we're overly concerned concerned with, and because of this, let's quickly cover Constellations. I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. Qiqi's Constellations are pretty awful. Nothing really special. C2 and 3 are without a doubt her best constellations. C2 increases her normal attack damage against enemies afflicted by cryo, and C3 adds an extra 3 levels to her burst. C1 is kind of useful, giving her an in-kit way of generating energy, but the rest are just kind of, well, garbage. I'm throwing a timestamp up on screen now to skip past this section, as before we get into talent priority and builds and all of the numbers, I want to quickly bring up one thing. The why behind it. My reasoning for building a character that is universally seen as being pretty bad. Well, there's the answer to it in that sentence there. Being able to build a character that is generally seen as absolute garbage and being able to show you they can work is essentially the point of this channel. My opinion on Genshin is this. If you like a character, if you like the way they look, or their personality, or just an element of their character in general, you should build them. At the end of the day, this is a game, and while yes, some characters are objectively better than others, why does that matter? Play the game you want to play. These guides exist for that reason. I don't want to tell you how to play your characters. Rather, I want to give you an insight into how to make the characters you enjoy perform their best. I want you to unlock your favorite character's true potential, allowing you to enjoy this game to the fullest. That's why I picked Qiqi for this video. After spending a hell of a lot of time discussing info for my favorite character, I wanted to change the pace a little. Show that no matter how downtrodden a character may be, everyone will always be able to work in any circumstance. Alright, that's, now off my chest. I'm feeling about infinitely better. And with that, let's jump into the numbers. Kicking off the maths part of the video, we have talent priority. Keep in mind I am approaching Qiqi from a damage maximization perspective rather than a pure support perspective. So, for the on-field carry and sub-DPS builds, first priority is normal attacks, followed by the elemental burst, and finally the skill. This means while Qiqi is on field, she'll have access to the most consistent damage she can output, while also giving her a decent damage ult. This will of course be running a physical build, which I'll cover when we go over the actual builds. For a more burst-oriented setup, the elemental burst is the first, then your elemental skill and normals are roughly on par. The reason for this is the burst support setup will be slightly more optimized for being supportive, giving Qiqi the ability to heal more effectively than the carry and sub-DPS options. Now, time to get into the builds. There's going to be two categories, physical DPS and burst DPS. I'll detail them more when I actually get to them, but for now it's time for the usual disclaimer. Skip to the time on screen if you've seen any of my previous videos. Qiqi and her weapon are both going to be leveled to 80 of 80. Qiqi herself will be C0 with level 7 talents across the board, and her weapon will be R1 for Gacha and Battle Pass and R3 for craftables. As usual, artifact set will be shown on screen alongside the artifact main stats. All substats have been discarded, and this is going to give us baseline numbers. Regarding crits, both non-crits and crits will be shown on screen, and I'll personally be saying the crit numbers. With that said, let's finally talk numbers. DPS Qiqi is pretty interesting, as there are two core ways of running this build. Firstly, as a team's main carry, utilizing 2 Pale Flame to Bloodstained for a permanent 50% physical bonus damage, and the second being a sub-DPS set using 4-piece Pale for the same bonus with an additional 18% attack, making her heal and damage more effective during her skill's uptime. Due to these similarities, I'll only be covering the damage from the carry build, as both have pretty much identical performance. The main difference is the carry has 100% uptime with a lower damage ceiling, while the sub DPS has 50% of the carry build's uptime with slightly higher damage ceilings. Artifact main stats will be attack percent on the sands, physical bonus on the goblet, and whichever form of crit is needed for your circlet. Substat priority is pretty standard. Crit rate and crit damage are your first priorities, followed by attack percent and energy recharge. Attack percent is preferred in this case as it benefits Qiqi's healing. Kicking off the numbers, we are going to have a free-to-play and low-to-play setup, which are both identical, as the overall best weapon available is the prototype Rancor. Not only does it specifically add additional physical bonus bonus damage, but it also adds more attack with its passive, meaning it's going to be pretty effective if you want to get more heals out. Damage-wise, it's also pretty solid. N1C's hitting for 15,055 damage, the initial hit of her elemental skill dealing 3,435, followed by pulses of 1,280, and a burst of 10,941. Keep in mind, these cryo numbers here are not being melted, meaning the damage you could potentially be seeing from them is even higher. Moving on to the higher investment setup, all that will be changing is the Rancor to an Aquila. 20% attack as the static passive, higher base attack, and more physical damage just means that it will outperform Rancor in every circumstance. Number-wise, we see an increase across the board, as expected from the transition from a 4-star to a 5-star weapon. N1Cs jump up to 16,658, 3,705 on the elemental skill's initial hit, 1,390 for the pulses, and the burst dealing 10,993. Again, melts are not being considered, but the big takeaway here is the practical damage increase isn't as much as you might expect. The prototype Rancor is a fantastic weapon and far easier to refine than any 5-star weapon, so depending on your situation, Rancor may be better for you. Party-wise, I'd personally recommend running Qiqi with a secondary cryo unit, giving easier access to superconduct as well as cryo resonance. This alongside an electro unit to enable superconduct and a free slot of your choice of unit. Some fantastic choices would be Kaya or Rosaria for your cryo unit, Lisa or Fischl for your electro slot, and regarding your free slot, there's a few different options. Crowd control is highly recommended, as Qiqi's charge attack will knock some enemies away. Ideally, this slot would be filled by a Zhongli due to his resistance shred, high damage burst, and the CC associated with it, and easy access to TOM or Noblesse buffs. That said, there are also other fantastic options. Bennett is great for his burst damage, additional team healing, and of course, the attack boost, and if you want to push for a slightly different route, you could look at a physical freeze comp, utilizing the free slot for a Xingqiu. This is also a pretty solid option. At the end of the day, you are free to experiment around and find the unit you enjoy the most in this slot. With all of that out of the way, let's move on to the burst-oriented Qiqi. Thankfully, burst Qiqi is also pretty simple, with the main goal of this build archetype being to bolster ult damage through reactions. As I spoke about earlier, most people don't know that Qiqi has extremely solid ult multis, and because it's a single ability, it's pretty simple to build around. The most ideal artifact set for this build is Lava Walker, specifically due to the 4-piece effects 35% bonus damage to enemies affected by Pyro. That said, it does mean that Qiqi would have to be run in a Pyro-oriented comp, and while reverse melting her ult is the key to achieving maximum damage, Lava Walker does restrict her flexibility. As such, another good option would be 2 Noblesse to Blizzard Strayer. This is also easy to farm, so if you are farming for multiple units, it may be the way to go until you have the chance to farm the Pyro domain specifically. Regardless of which way you shoot, the main stats will be the same. Attack percent, cryo bonus damage, and crit depending on your substats. Speaking of substats, the crit duology is of course the most important, followed by a 3-way tie between attack percent, energy recharge, and elemental mastery. ER is more important here due to Qiqi's extremely high ult cost, attack increases her damage, and EM improves reactions. With all that, it's number time. I'll be skipping over the completely free-to-play side of things here, as Iron Sting is the best F2P option, and if I had to decide between crafting an Iron Sting or a Rancor, in terms of everything, I'd personally avoid Sting if possible. Due to this, we'll be starting off with the low investment setup. The weapon of choice is the Lion's Roar, increasing attack and thus improving both burst and healing capacity, while adding on to the damage increase provided by Lava Walker. Before we talk numbers, I will quickly add that these damages are considering reverse melt damage, so keep that in mind. The initial hit of the elemental skill is hitting for 10,483 cryo damage, with the following pulses hitting for 3,931. And the burst is hitting a very solid 31,097 damage. Again, keep in mind, these numbers are assuming each hit is a melt, so try to keep your enemies afflicted by Pyro as much as possible. Finally, rounding out the builds, we have the higher investment burst Qiqi, switching out Lion's Roar for a choice of 2 weapons, the Summit Shaper for overall better healing, or the Jade Cutter for the higher damage ceiling. Cutter really does just make character building significantly easy, guaranteeing your ability to run a crit damage circlet. For the sake of showing baseline numbers, I've used cutter for my calcs and have switched over to a crit damage circlet. Melt numbers here are pretty fantastic, as expected. 13,257 on skill cast, 4,972 for each of the following pulses, and 39,329 damage on the burst. As you can see, they definitely aren't numbers to slouch over. Quickly talking teams, you would ideally want to run Bennett and Zhang Ling, and then another support unit. My personal pick would be between Sucrose and Kazuha, as both improve the overall damage being done by your characters. So that more or less brings us to a close. Hopefully you found this video useful, especially if you ended up pulling Qiqi by accident. So don't fret, she's actually pretty decent, way better than most people give her credit for, and while yes, there are other options that can outperform her, it might be worth finally giving the zombie lolly a chance. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. It's a pleasure to finally be back, and I look forward to putting out more consistent content once again. Until the next one though, if you have any questions or want to come chat, head over to the Zhongli Man's Discord, the home of Fish and many other Zhongli simps world round. With that said, if you did enjoy, please do consider dropping a sub. It'll keep you up to date with everything, and now that I'm going to be uploading more consistently, it will also let me know what you guys like seeing. With that now, my time is done. The market is closed and the port has settled. Go get some rest.